All right. Hello, hello. Welcome to our last week of normal lectures. So today and Thursday are both some of I just think these lectures are so fun. I like giving them so much because I think that you guys now have a lot of different angles on how to talk about animals, their anatomy, their bodies, the evolution of those forms, and some evolutionary ideas for putting those into context, for building your own ideas, your own hypotheses. One of the things I like so much about these lectures is I hope that they can sort of synthesize for you so many different lines of evidence we have for how vertebrate evolution happens and how science knows things just generally. This is a beautiful painting. You have no conception of this. I just want to tell you that probably right now in 2023 is the best time ever in terms of reconstructions of the past. There are so many artists online. There are so many really well-informed people who have artistic skills working alongside scientists to really show us ancient worlds in ways that are really, I feel, highly accurate. All the plants in this scene, the animals that are occurring together, this is great. So of course there's, subjective stuff here, the colors, we have no idea, but you guys can take that as you think. But I think one of the points I want you guys to take from these lectures is how all of this stuff is constantly being tested basically by new data. Hypotheses are being made, evidence is being piled on to understand these big transformations. And so today we're going to talk about the evolution of birds from dinosaurs, something that in the late 90s you might think of as early 2000s. There's the first feathered dinosaurs were a few years old. The first published feathered dinosaurs were the mid 90s. And so now we have so many. There's so much to talk about. It's so cool. This is one of the great animals for surprises. So this is an animal called Dinochirus. It's from Asia. It's from the end of the age of dinosaurs and for about 80 years, the only thing anybody knew about it was it had 8-foot-long arms. The only fossils in museums anywhere in the world were a couple of sets of arms, and both arms are 8 feet long. That's all they knew. That's a real nightmare. All the art from it in the 70s is just this gigantic Freddy Krueger monster coming to get you. And then it's one of the only times I've been in a room of other scientists when some Mongolian and Chinese scientists had found 2 or 3 full skeletons of this thing, including the head. And they were had their talk, and everybody's in the room and everybody's waiting because all we knew was arms. And when they revealed that this is what it looked like, it's a bunch of full professors and curators going because that is not what anybody thought. The arms don't even look that big, right? But they're 8 feet long, just so you know. On the body, this hump on the back, this long neck, almost like a ducky bill. This is not a duck-billed dinosaur, by the way. You might have heard that word, duck-billed dinosaur. It's not, but it has that same face. And it's one of these animals that's actually decently close to the ancestor of things like today's birds. And the point I want to make here is just that it's such a surprise. Really fun to get into these things. So for this class, we've been focused on the living organisms of today. And of course, that's what we should be talking about. So here's your reptile biodiversity. These are all clades you guys are familiar with. These are all organisms that you've now encountered a few different times. You could probably intelligently tell somebody now why a bird is a reptile or why a crocodile isn't a dinosaur. There's answers to those questions that have to do with how the tree of life flows and is shaped and how we understand life to have unfolded. When we were going through biodiversity, this was one of those nodes where I had I don't know what I gave you guys, 6, I think, red tick marks, right? You had so many synapomorphies for birds. Birds are so very different, if you're just looking at the modern, from the other groups of reptiles that we already know. They don't really look like turtles or crocs or lizards or snakes or the tuatara, but those things all kind of look like each other in sort of vague, scaly, crawly kind of ways. So obviously, that should immediately spark in you a lot of questions about well, then what's happening here? How much time is represented? How many organisms that are maybe extinct might fit there to help us fill that in? And so of course, that's where my personal research is always focused. I really love that somebody who works on DNA, somebody who works on behavior, somebody who works on endothermy, they might use a phylogeny like this of the living organisms to get at questions in evolution, to test their own hypotheses using living organisms. But what is so great about the fossil record is that it really only has anatomy to give you. But all these lineages have fossil members. There are fossils of early songbirds. There are fossils of early birds that are related to these birds, but not those ones. Fossil snakes, fossil archosauromorphs, fossil turtles. And so these ones right here, these organisms are our window into understanding the transformation to get from animals like this back to a common ancestor of an animal like a crocodile, which doesn't look anything like them. And so fossils really help us understand the details of those anatomical changes. And that's why I think they're the best, personal opinion. And so that lineage right there, the reason I'm telling you about it is because it's like, I'm going to say easily the most popular ancient like branch of the tree of life, because it's got all the things that people want to talk about when they talk about fossils. People aren't so stoked about the earliest turtles. I think they're interesting. They only have some part of a shell and whatever, they still have teeth, but people will take it or leave it. These things make movies, these things make books, these things sell toys. So of course, we're talking about things like pterodactyls, which are close relatives of things like dinosaurs and birds, but they're not. And then all the different groups of dinosaurs. Dinosauria, if you treat the dinosaurs as like one group of organisms, it's a paraphyletic group relative to birds. Birds are absolutely within Dinosauria. That little hummingbird is just as much a dinosaur as that gigantic 120-foot long monster that eats trees. Which is really, really cool, right? So here's this piece of art from a few years ago that just makes me so happy every time. That's just called dinosaur diversity. And so some of these things are all asynchronous. None of them live at the same time, almost at all. So it's totally fine to put like the crow and the house sparrow in there. Go ahead and talk to your neighbors for a quick second, just because we're talking about cool dinosaur stuff, and I've got this fun slide up there. Do you recognize any of these organisms? It's okay if you don't.
No. I mean,
bird, I guess.
yeah.
You got all these things right. Oh, it's. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe the green zone.
There are like a couple, I'm gonna say three, I'll say three, maybe four, like super celebrities on the picture that you definitely all know. But then the other ones I'm surprised. So which ones who do we recognize? Thank you very much. Triceratops, of course, not a trick. There's plenty of horned dinosaurs. Triceratops is one of like, I don't know, 50 probably, but that's a very famous one and a quite big one. What else?
Stegosaurus.
Yeah, that's another super celeb, I think. Super celeb, and then who's the big super celeb? Thank you very much. Tyrannosaurus Rex, one of the largest of like the meat-eating carnivorous dinosaurs, famously with the little fingers. Although you guys can appreciate now that this is comparative anatomy, every child, your niece, your nephew, when you were a kid, whatever, everybody goes like, right? T-Rex has 2 fingers. You guys now know your anatomy. T-Rex actually has these 2 fingers. It's 1 and 2, not 2 and 3. But the other thing that is absolutely true and is a total nightmare is that those reduced limbs and those reduced fingers, those reduced digits on the limbs are evolutionarily, a reduction. And so all dinosaurs at the beginning have 5, and T-Rex is up here with 2 near the end of dinosaur time. And when I worked in Chicago, they have the most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex on display. And one time, its arms were down in the lab, like the arms were on their metal armature, but like sitting like this. They're only as big as your arm, which is really fun. And I was looking at it and I was like, what is that? And this individual tyrannosaur was so old when it died that some of the cartilaginous parts of its body had ossified. And I had no idea that T-Rex does have 3 fingers. It's just this one is like a 7. So probably all of them are actually like this. And only in the oldest individuals does this start to become a bone when they're really old. And so they're actually, everybody needs to go kind of like when they make a dumb little T-Rex joke. All right, anything else?
Is the tall sauropod a brachiosaur?
It sure looks like one, right? So Brachiosaurus is that one from Jurassic Park, that's the big opening scene, right? This is actually supposed to be like a titanosaur, which is this group of sauropods that live later that are truly the biggest sauropods. Yeah, the other super celeb is probably this one, which is like Brontosaurus / Apatosaurus. But there's a little raptor, totally blue with feathers. I don't know if it's blue, but the feathers are real. Little armored dinosaurs, more feathers, more quills. Birds, this is the earliest bird, Archaeopteryx, and then a bunch of living crow and a house sparrow, like you might see outside today. All these organisms are dinosaurs. And so these kind of figures or drawings, paintings really, are really popular because they help underscore the point that like, and you guys probably know this, right? Dinosauria is like super famous, just like mammal is super famous, but all of these are just like single nodes on the tree of life. Euarchonticleries is not super famous. Mammalia is super famous. Dinosauria is super famous. So this is like just supposed to illustrate, look how disparate, look at the different evolutionary things that happen within the lineage we call, the clade we call Dinosauria. And I would agree, that's remarkably diverse. Okay. Birds being dinosaurs is something that like when it first was really popping in the 90s and the 2000s, a lot of people really resisted, including a lot of academics. They did not like it. They wanted birds to be somewhere in reptiles, but they didn't like the raptor answer. It got to the point where it became unscientific. And it's really funny because I think most people who come up into paleontology now, most of the public now kind of gets it and sort of sees a lot of the similarities. A lot of things about birds that always seemed a little bit weird, they're just cute little fluffers, like make sense if you imagine them as dinosaurs. These are, I just think it's funny to look at their feet and be like, well, come on, like that's all you need, really, right? Put the feathers on and look at their feet. So birds are very much intense organisms. And I like the certain species, and of course I've handpicked the species. I could have put 5 hummingbirds up here and they'd all look cute and it wouldn't be the same point. But plenty of birds are predators, and predators in ways that dinosaurs probably would have been, like foot-driven, stamp you down, rip you up with their mouth, throw you down your gullet. We haven't really talked about these organisms. Anybody know this one? The shoebill, yes, called because it's supposed to look like a clog, like its whole face looks like a clog. Anybody know anything about the shoebill besides its like absolute nightmare stare?
Terrestrials with stalkers.
Oh, Henry probably talked about it, didn't he? Yeah, terrestrial stalkers, that's true. Shoebills specialize at like eating lungfish, which is really cool. In wetlands in Africa, they like hunt them out. Cassowaries are one of the only birds in the world that like have like a appreciable human fatality score. Most birds don't kill people. They might chase you and ruin your jog, but cassowaries are one of the only animals that have like medically documented like human, because when they defend themselves or they defend their territory, they kick, and on their second toe, they have a huge claw. So very much like raptors from the Mesozoic would do. Cassowary convergently has a long claw. It's nowhere near as like curved as like a raptor from a movie or a raptor from the fossil record. But this claw has been used and sadly has ended the lives of like several people. It's pretty intense, right? You don't think of birds doing that. And then up there, I just have to show you, that's the harpy eagle. I think, if I remember right, I think that's the heaviest eagle in the world. It's a South American Amazonian eagle, specializes in flying through the rainforest and grabbing monkeys and sloths like just out of the tree that they're hanging from. So if you ever want to like get inspired for like, I don't know, carnage, like Google harpy eagle nest, because there's just like howler monkey skeletons and sloth skeletons. Like it looks like it's a movie because it's so like horror set, and they're all little monkeys, so they all have like, you know, skulls with eyes. You're like, oh my god, and there's just piles of them. Google harpy eagle nest. All right, so here's the phylogeny of Dinosauria. This one is totally fine. At this point, it's like 25 years old, but like the basics of it are still right. And so a lot of these animals are animals that people have familiarity with. You guys probably know about animals like Triceratops or Pachycephalosaurus with the big dome, or the duckbills, or the armored dinosaurs, or the stegosaurs. You guys have the skills. You can read this tree, see how they're related. On one side, you have a lot of these different plant eaters. And on the other side, sharing a common ancestor, you have all the long-necked dinosaurs as sister to all the meat-eating dinosaurs. That's a surprise to some people. But even the earliest sauropods, the earliest long neck dinosaurs are like bipeds with sharp teeth that are like hunting, they're carnivores, which is really cool. Only later in their evolution do they get unbelievably huge and become absolute herbivores. And so even here within theropods, so the meat-eating dinosaurs, here's a bunch of famous animals you might know: Spinosaurus, T-Rex, raptors, and it's all paraphyletic relative to a group down here, which in the Jurassic evolves the feathers and the flying that we call birds, aves. So this is where birds go in the dinosaur tree of life, and you guys now know where that plugs in on like the reptile tree of life. That's Theropoda, sorry, there's the node, Theropoda, mostly bipedal animals, running around, eating meat. All right, I want to set the scale for you guys, like time-wise a little bit. So here's the geological time scale. You've seen this a bunch of times in this class in different ways. And so here you and I are living in the present. You're sitting in class. If I go like this is like human evolution. Basically, our split from chimps happens here in this time frame. Here's the asteroid effect that kills things like T-Rex. The T-Rex lives right here. Stegosaurus is like here. So there's more time between Stegosaurus and T-Rex than there is between you and T-Rex. It's fantastic. And so it goes back and back and back and back. And so the Mesozoic is when dinosaurs evolve and when birds evolve within dinosaurs. The first period in the Mesozoic is called the Triassic. This is the one that I personally study the most. When I go out and collect fossils, I care about the Triassic. So you guys might think it's interesting, given what we've talked about in this class, to know the Triassic is when the first frogs, the first salamanders, the first turtles, the first crocodiles, the first mammals, the first dinosaurs, the first teleos fishes, all of those groups show up here in this time period. So the last 250 million years, the last quarter bill, is when most of the diversity you and I have talked about today first shows up recognizably, which is really, I think, cool. The next period in the Mesozoic is called the Jurassic. This is when dinosaurs really kind of like, if you want to use this word, I don't really like it, like take over or dominate, meaning that like body size and niche space, a lot of terrestrial ecosystems, land-living ecosystems are filled by dinosaurs. That's when it really happens. The Triassic is more of a mixed bag. There's a lot going on in the Triassic. And in the Jurassic, in these forests, that star right there represents when we have the first fossil evidence of birds, tiny little theropod dinosaurs with feathers flapping around in trees. So they're that old. So I just told you that like T-Rex goes extinct here, the asteroid impact is here at 66 million, but there's birds in the middle part of the Jurassic. So for like most of dinosaur time, there's pterodactyls flying around, there's big dinosaurs eating trees, and there's little feathered birds like just right there the whole time. They don't show up after, they're not the descendants of the dinosaurs, they're part of the dinosaur ecosystem. And so the most famous of these bird fossils, it's like a total scientific fluke, I think, is this bird called Archaeopteryx. You guys have heard of Archaeopteryx, I think, yes? There's a clothing brand called Arc'teryx with like that fossil as its logo. So Archaeopteryx is the first bird. This is one of the most famous fossils. There's 21 really good fossils of Archaeopteryx. They all come from the bottom of these lakes that are now in Germany. What is so important about Archaeopteryx is you have a skeleton with like a head and a neck, and then here's these arms that are looking very much like bird wings, but they have claws on them. No beak, there's teeth in the mouth, a big long bony tail, but these fossils have preserved in this pretty limestone the actual feathers that are up there on the arms. This is like a real fluke of history because this animal's from Germany and it was found in the 1800s. So it's super weird to think about the fact that science, Western science, and even paleontology has like had this animal and like been holding it for almost at this point 160 years. And nobody put it with dinosaurs because it was not right to do that. They didn't understand what would be the transition. Dinosaurs were big, hulking, fat reptiles that were dumb. This thing's kind of like a bird. It probably goes down to the same spot they come down to on the tree of life, but people are barely even talking about evolution at that time. So this thing's like this like missing link in like 1870s, 1890s, 1920s, like cartoons. Nobody knows what to do with it really besides to say, this is the first bird just because it has feathers. End of discussion. All right, but then, like I said, we go through a whole other period, a huge amount of time, 66, 140, this is almost an 80 million year period of time right here called the Cretaceous. And there's tons of dinosaurs running around, including a lot of diversity of things that are birds. You got out of your time machine. Some of them are gonna have teeth, which might freak you out. But for the most part, they're gonna look like little birds. And so birds are living alongside these dinosaurs that are, things you might think of classically as dinosaurs that whole time. There they are, booping around in the mud, like you might see a killdeer or something. doing today. All right, so here's the world in the Triassic period, what it looked like. Go ahead and just do a quick thing. I know you guys saw these yesterday. Talk to your neighbors, make some observations about the Triassic. That's us, almost beachfront really, which is pretty great. All the Triassic fossils of Idaho are ocean fossils. We have like reefs and stuff. So Idaho, that we have fossils for the Triassic, is the ocean. All right, go ahead and chat for a second.
Yesterday. It's like long way.
And that's.
Give another one.
Like a big. So there's the northeast.
Can we get some observations? Anything you want, because I just think this is fun, and I like exposing you to these maps.
How deep are these coastal shallow formations?
Oh, that's really hard to know. There's certainly like, the bottom is in like the photic zone, so it's gonna be something like 100 feet or so max. Because there's like totally covered with algae and corals that are photosynthetic symbionts. So not deep. One of the best, I wish I should have put a slide up here, I get it. But there's Idaho has one of the most important early Triassic sites in the whole world, because there's soft tissue preservation, like the invertebrates and the squids, like the little crabs and the little squids and the sponges, they have their soft parts preserved. It's really spectacular. It was like a Nature paper in 2017, like in Paris, Idaho, outside of Bear Lake. It's really cool. What other things people talk about?
So because all the continent buildings are connected somehow, at some point, I guess the dinosaurs and other species are able to cross.
Yeah. It's a really cool thing. We see clades dispersing, like we find their fossils in Antarctica and South Africa and Australia, and also in like Russia, which is like not that weird if you can imagine, you know, the fact that they're all connected, for sure. So how is the world different when there's loose continents versus connected continents versus like one supercontinent? You guys can imagine like evolution and biogeography totally being driven by that. The Pacific is humongous. The Pacific is so much bigger. Like if you come at the Earth from the right angle from space now, it's all blue. Back then, you could have come at it from a bunch of angles and it's all blue, and you can fly your spaceship in orbit and it's just blue. It keeps being blue because all the land's on one side. That's wild, isn't it? It's like nighttime for almost everybody at the same time if you live on land. That's crazy, huh? It's weird. What other things?
We were talking about how it looks like all of the land animals have very scaly skin.
Oh yeah. There's not the evidence for like all the different kinds of integuments. Fur and feathers are both likely showing up, at least in their ancestral forms in the Triassic. You're not gonna get like feathers like a feather you find on the ground kind of feather until the Jurassic. But like the fluffiness of a lot of these organisms that are on the bird side of things is probably there. And certainly the little mammals should be getting pretty fluffy about this time too. So this is a very weirdo time for art because it's sometimes very difficult to find direct evidence of those features until they're really clear. And then you get fossils in the next period that have them. They should be around here, but we don't know exactly when. That's like a big debate topic. One thing I want to point out to you guys is at the end of the Triassic, this rift starts to happen. So this is North America, this is Africa, this is South America. Pangea starts to break up. This is all Pangea. It starts to break up here in the Triassic, and by the next stage, the Jurassic, it's broken. You get the southern continents all together still. That's called Gondwana, once that happens. And then the northern continents up here. What I think is spectacular is these rift valleys are filling in with lakes, and then they get filled in with ocean, and they break up. There are rocks in North Carolina that are like on the beach that you can go see right now. And then there's rocks in Morocco that you can go see right now. And they're the same rocks pointing at each other because they just got split apart. It's super fantastic to imagine like Florida and Senegal being like, you can walk between them. All right, so here's the Jurassic. The world's a little different. We won't spend as much time here. There's a bunch of cool stuff happening in the oceans, like we talked about yesterday, spectacular stuff. We won't go into that too much. Quick, talk to each other, talk about the Jurassic. How is this world different from the Triassic world? I hope you can recognize things a little more. All right, any fun observations here? How much do you love that, like, this little baby is the Atlantic Ocean? It doesn't even go down here yet. But the rift is going, it's like, it's gonna go eventually. I heard people say wetter. One thing you might notice about the Triassic, one thing you might notice about this world is that these are non-ice worlds. These are hothouse worlds. There's no permanent polar ice at all. Also, there's no landmass on the South or the North Pole in either one of these, really. Ocean on both. An uninterrupted ocean, like the Arctic Ocean is ocean today, but it's like surrounded by land. So you could think of it as the backside of the Earth. If we were to spin this map, it's like uninterrupted up to the pole. That's pretty different.
So do you look for a lot of fossils in like Northern Europe and Canada, Greenland areas?
For sure.
Is that where there are a lot of?
Yeah. So Archaeopteryx, that oldest bird, is from this like limestone. Parts of Germany are right here. It's from this like kind of briny lake, because Europe is like this archipelago of islands with like little lakes in the middle. So it's not a lot of big animals like living on these islands. Super weird. But yeah, those watery areas are great places for animals to get buried. And if you get buried, you might become a fossil. So like that's a good predictor of those kind of things. I love this landmass. I would get out of my time machine down here. Madagascar, India, Antarctica, Australia, New Guinea, New Zealand. It's like, what is happening down here? We don't have a lot of good fossils from there, and it's like, I bet it's wackadoo. All right, how about the Cretaceous? A bunch of other scary stuff from yesterday: turtles, lizards, plesiosaurs swimming around with those sharks, and a bunch of dinos with some birds. Again, oh, yep, there's you guys. All right, so talk to each other really quick. How's the Cretaceous looking?
Everything on the yeah, you can show it.
And like Antarctica. Same issue that is right now.
We don't.
Well, like Asia is.
All right, what are some observations we can make here? This is the last one of you.
There's a lot more ocean.
A lot more ocean, it seems, right? So the continents are flooded, is what we would say. And that's almost certainly just due to the fact that the ocean basins, there's a lot of tectonic stuff happening. So ocean basins are just like a little bit shallower than they are now. It's like the bottom of the oceans pushes up, so then the waters go up onto a lot of the continents. And so that's insane. You can find giant, scary swimming mosasaurs, monster lizards in like Minnesota and Nebraska and Kansas and Texas. And it's just like, what are y'all doing here? There's an ocean all the way up into Canada. You can find those fossils. Those birds that lock their arms and swim at their feet, we know they're fossils from all over here. What's really cool is people have done histology. They cut the bones, they look at the bones under a slide. These birds are migrating. They're almost certainly like nesting up here and then like feeding down here and they're going back and forth, swimming across the oceans of Kansas is what people say. Really fun stuff. Some of the best sea turtle fossils in the world are from Kansas. That's fun. All right, so oceans are high. There's no ice. Anything else? This is like the height of continental disconnection. There's tons of endemism. Madagascar and India have ridiculously weird dinosaurs and ridiculously weird other animals. And so does South America. And Africa, we really don't know too much about, but it's kind of weird. These continents talk to each other. There's a lot of back and forth across them. But then the European islands get super weird. There's like the equivalent of the platypus in European islands. It's like a dinosaur from the beginning of dinosaurs that absolutely goes extinct everywhere else is like still around on those European islands late in the Cretaceous. So the platypus, but like in what's now Romania, which is super cool. I think I heard Ashley, you're saying like the continents' shapes are like familiar shapes. And so the continents themselves are made of like light rock. The reason they're called continents is they float on the heavier rock that makes up the bottom of the oceans. So they've always kind of been roughly these shapes. These used to be merged and then tectonic activity broke them apart. But those like shapes are consistent. So you can make the ocean go up and down and the rocks just don't care so much. It's an interesting thing. Asia is not like that. Asia is all about collisions. Most of, like I showed you guys yesterday, from like Singapore to Portugal is pretty much all mountainous because it's all been collisions of this and all these like going up into this mainland part of Asia. Really cool. Asia's a complicated continent. All right, enough of that. Here is a fossil, so a little artistic reconstruction, but then a very nice skeletal diagram of these animals that represent the first dinosaurs or the absolute closest relatives of dinosaurs. There's a Triassic animal, so 240 million years ago, you get out your time machine, you're gonna see an animal that looks like this. This is the earliest dinosaur like body plan, earliest dinosaur kind of shape. Here is a dinosaur today. That's a good generalization for the rest of the members of its group. There's 11,000 birds today. Pigeon is a good bird skeleton. I gave you this pretty pigeon instead of a street pigeon, but it's the same skeleton really underneath. So do me a favor, talk to your neighbors, answer these questions as best you can. What are the differences you notice? What are you expecting to see? When are these changes happening, right? These anatomical changes, if we have a whole lineage's history, like humans get bipedal way before we get big brains. What are the changes that happen? What order do you think they would happen in? Why might they've happened at all? All right, go ahead, please, and chat with each other. Doesn't have to be skeletal, you can talk about anything.
That's like change it into. It's supposed to grant. Yeah. Don't keep trading. Nothing. Yeah. That's
All right, can I get some examples of some obvious changes that must have happened? Reduced tail. And I think what you are talking about there is the bony tail, right? dinosaur thing has a long reptile tail full of vertebrae with neural spines and all the normal reptile tail kind of stuff. That pigeon does have a bunch of tail vertebrae, but they're all fused up, and the end of them has this big thing on it called a pygostyle, and that pygostyle has feathers that stick off of it. And the thing that you guys already talk about when you talk about a bird's tail is actually its integument, right? It's skin. The feathers make a lot of the tail, but there are bones in there. They're pretty reduced relative to the dinosaur early relative. What else?
Breastbones.
What about it?
It's super pronounced and huge on the bird.
What do we call it? On the bird.
Keel.
Yeah, big keeled sternum. So there's chest bones there on that early dinosaur relative, but they're flat, pretty general reptile shape. Not huge muscle insertion sites. On the pigeon, they're humongous muscle insertion sites for the flight muscles. All right, what else? On the foot? Yeah, so the dinosaur thing has 5 toes. The bird has lost 1, lost 5, this one, the pinky. And then the thumb, digit 1, or the big toe, has spun around to the back. A lot of birds have this, we call tridactyl foot. You guys have seen, right? You go to any like store and there's a dinosaur toy footprint, the 3 toes, right? So the tridactyl foot would be spun around, digit 1. Cool, 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 cool. What else?
Beak.
What do you mean?
A beak.
So the bird has a beak, and like, what's a beak? Just give me one more.
Like a keratinous modification.
Keratinous beak, there's the jaw bones there, the homologous bones of the jaws. It's still a dentary and a maxilla and a premaxilla, but in the bird, they're covered in the keratinous beak. What's going on in the dinosaur thing come out? Teeth. Yeah, so like a teeth, what am I saying? Teeth to like a keratinous beak. So a lot going on there. Tooth loss, beak gain, different things like that are happening for sure. Really confusingly, this specific example of an early dinosaur thing has a little beak only on the lower jaw and only in the very front. It has nothing to do with birds, but it's true. Dinosaurs are real sloppy. They evolved beaks like 15 times. They go for it. Birds just did it and they get it, but other dinosaurs do it too. All right, what else?
The bird is bipedal.
Hey now. For sure. What else?
To go along with that, the pelvis is pretty different.
How so?
Uh,
I mean, I agree, but
The pelvic girdle is kind of fused in different shapes.
the bird pelvis is like the sacrum, all the bones of the pubis, the vertebrae, they all just become one gigantic bone. It's like hard to tell them apart. It's a crazy shape. If you've ever seen a bird pubis, our ilium and ischium and backbone that's in there, the sacrum, a bird hip, next time you eat a rotisserie chicken, just do yourself a favor, pull it out. It's crazy. So, okay, so like real fused up hips. Yeah. All right, these are good. These are a lot of good observations. I'm gonna say the hands are pretty different. You guys didn't go for that one. Okay. Talk to each other again. These are all anatomical changes that we can expect to see. I'm gonna tell you right now, we absolutely have fossils that can show you all of these things. What are you expecting the order to be? And this is not how evolution works, of course, but if you imagine that animal, are you going to imagine it gets tridactyl feet before it comes bipedal, before it gets a keeled sternum? What is the deal? What are you expecting the order of these? You can just use these 6 if you want to be. And why would those things change at all? Each one of them. Also, just because I want to. Thanks so much. Okay. Chat with each other about that. Which one comes first? Which one comes second? Which one comes third? Which one comes fourth?
Yes.
Yeah. So
All right, any ideas? You don't have to put them all in order, but just like a couple, like, I think this one because of this one, before this one because of something. I heard you all chatting. It was great. I'm sorry. I want to actually get into some other stuff. Yeah,
First, and then like a tridactyl foot.
So bipedal and then going to a tridactyl foot. Any reason for that?
We just assume the tridactyl foot would be best for bipedal, so we're trying to like stabilize them.
Okay, interesting, interesting. A stabilizing thing. What other ideas might people have about these?
Feathers were first.
Feathers are first before any of the rest. Fluffed out, walking around on all fours with your toothy mouth. Okay, what else?
In the beak, since like early dinosaurs had somewhat similar to the beak, could have happened pretty early on. Well,
The big things are real nightmare. I will tell you that the Triassic session, I chaired the Triassic session at last year's like paleo conference, and the whole thing just devolved into a beak. Everything, people are like, here's my brand new whatever, and everyone's like, that's great. The beak thing is a real problem, you guys, and it was really funny. The discussion section was all beak, because it's a real situation right now. Okay, these are good ideas. I love it. I want to point out to you guys that you've done this already. I showed you this picture in like week 3 or 4, whatever it was, when we did birds and we were getting snapomorphies. And all I asked you then was what makes birds different from everybody else? And you guys said, oh, they're on 3 toes, I think. Oh, they have feathers. Oh, they're on 2 legs. So you guys did a lot of this already kind of in a different context, like comparing them to the living groups they're related to, which I think is really fun. And so these were the snapomorphies you guys had for this class. These are what you like, nightmare flashback. Exam 1 had to remember about birds, right? These are the different snapomorphies. Feathers, pneumatized bones, wings, which means all the things, furcula, which is that wishbone, fused clavicles, to make a wishbone, that keeled sternum, loss of marginal dentition, that's what you're talking about here. The premaxilla, the maxilla, the dentary have lost their teeth. Also, a keratinized beak covers those same bones in living birds. So these are stuff that you guys have kind of already come at, and I like these different ideas for getting at how it works. Here's a whole lot of dinosaurs, a whole bunch of them. And there's a bunch of monophyletic clades of life, some of which you guys know. You know this one. Birds plus crocodiles is archosaurs. All those things are in there too. Here's birds today. There's a bunch of different kinds of birds, paraphyletic groups of birds relative to the ones that you know. A whole bunch of dinosaurs, mostly theropods, paraphyletic relative to the birds. Here's dinosaurs, here's your horns and your armors and your spikes, here's your long necks. We're not gonna talk about them today too much because they go off and do their own thing. Here's that thing you just saw, which is technically outside dinosaurs sometimes. So you can, I hope, get a glimmer of an idea. Look at some of those animals, especially up there. Which of these characters are they already rocking? Which ones are they not rocking? Very, very, very fun, very interesting. The point I want to make is that all these features, the avian snapomorphies you guys learned are spread like this, which is really wild, right? They are not close. It looks like it all happens at once, and it's like there's a million things to remember for birds. If you put in all the extinct stuff, it's much more spread out. Another one right there. All right, I want to talk about some of those bird features that you guys learned for class. So pneumatized bone. You might remember that, how much are you going to talk about this? Andy, are you doing sauropod stuff too hard?
A little bit.
Okay, I'll go light then. So you guys remember that birds have unidirectional respiration, so do crocodiles, right? There's bellows, air sacs that they inflate and deflate, and that pushes air in and out of their body and across their lungs where actual respiration is happening, but the lungs themselves are rigid. Your lungs are the things that move because you're a dumb mammal, but these reptiles have awesome sacs and then the lung doesn't move. The lungs pump, and these air sacs go all throughout the body. Birds have hollow bones. A lot of those bones have air sac, little pieces of the air sac that go into them, keep their bones full of air, very light. Dinosaurs, and actually pterodactyls plus dinosaurs, a whole bunch of these animals all have that. It's a very ancient thing, this pneumatized bone. And so one thing you can do with pneumatized bone, this is what birds did, is make your skeleton really light, and then you can fly. These nightmare animals, sauropod dinosaurs, long neck dinosaurs. This is one of dorsal vertebra from an animal like Brachiosaurus, so one of the bones from its back. This is an entire human spine from the hips to the head, just for scale. Long neck dinosaur bones are completely hollowed out on the inside. The air sacs that these animals have, go throughout all their skeleton. So this gigantic animal, way bigger than anything else that walks around right now, basically has 4 like Roman columns for legs, and then its head to tail skeleton is as light as it can possibly be. Obviously, it still weighs many tens of tons, but the bones themselves are like way lighter. When you pick one up, it's like, it feels very light for how huge it is because they're so full of air sacs. So this is another way that this ancient synapomorphy, pneumatized bone and unidirectional respiration, has totally let another clade do something completely different, which is attain tremendous body size. So a dinosaur's neck is full of air sacs. It's spectacular. Here's a sauropod dinosaur vertebra going into a CT machine. Here it is laying there in its plaster jacket. These are all cross sections through the vertebra. It's almost all empty on the inside because there would have been air sacs in there. So you can use that pneumatized bone to do something not flying. It's almost the opposite of flying. It's becoming tremendously huge. How great is that? So pneumatized bone goes way back here. And technically it might go here. Pterodactyls might have done it on their own. We don't really know. Unidirectional respiration though is way back here. So imagine all the evolutionary play that's happening. Because crocs have it and birds have it, but then pneumatizing your bone with your air sacs, wow, that might have happened a few times. All right, as we go our way up through this evolution, there's another red thing up here within theropods. So here's these meat-eating dinosaurs. One of the characters you guys mentioned that I'm not going to talk about, but it's real, is bipedality. The bipedality is here. On this tree, you can see how all these animals are up on 2 legs. These ones are on 4. What's really cool is that actually the bipedality is here at Dinosauria, and all the dinosaurs on 4 legs that he plants that look like this, that he plants that look like this, came from bipedal ancestors. And as they got humongous and specialized in plants and got huge guts, they all went down on all 4s. So quadrupedality evolves a bunch of times. For dinosaurs, walking on 2 legs is the ancestral condition, which is crazy. That's not one of the characters from class, but I'm trying to tie it in with what you guys said here. That red tick mark, which is inside Theropoda, but not all the way for all theropods, that one does not have it, is one of the other characters you guys had for class, the furcula, the wishbone. So this is a fossil furcula from the Triassic of Arizona. It's 220 million years old. So this dinosaur has these 2 clavicles fused together to make this thing called a furcula. Obviously in birds, it gets really big and is really elastic because birds use their furcula to flap their wings, and then the elastic energy of it helps them open their wings again. It's like a spring. That's what a bird's doing with its furcula. All of these dinosaurs though have that fused clavicle. And so it's a big question to be like, what is going on? T-Rex has a little wishbone. I don't think Tyrannosaurus Rex is flying with its wishbone. So there's a huge question in theropod evolution, people who study these kinds of dinosaurs, what are some of these theropods doing for 100-some million years with fused clavicles? Nobody really understands the functionality of fusing your clavicles. It makes a lot of sense how birds have evolved to use that to fly. They've adapted a skeleton they inherited to fly. What are these guys doing with furculae? I don't know, nobody knows. It's really cool. Probably not for flying. All right, as we keep going up the tree, more and more and more stuff. I can't resist showing you guys some biodiversity because that's just my identity. As we go up, these are a bunch of the early theropods. I just like showing them to you guys because I think you can see they have a bunch of the features you've already talked about. The fluffiness is starting to maybe come in. Everybody's bipedal or tridactyl foot, 3 toes in the front. Digit 1, which is the big toe, is pointed backwards in all of these animals. Obviously, everybody's still got their marginal dentition. It's kind of their hallmark. I can't spend too much time talking about these, but these are all early diverging theropod groups. So you maybe have heard of these if you're a dinosaur nerd. Coelophysis, Ceratosaurus. Here's Dilophosaurus, aka the spitter from Jurassic Park. It spits in the guy's face and has the big frill. Both of those are completely made up, but they're pretty fun. Right? These all go to this part of the tree. Anyway, we don't have time. But one of these early members is one of the first phylogenetically instances of the fluffy integuments that feathers are derived from. This is a little dinosaur from Europe called Sauromymus. It's almost certainly a juvenile little carnivorous dinosaur. And you can see in the fossil here, there's a bunch of blow-ups. there's all of these like little filaments coming off the tail, coming off the neck, coming off different parts of its body. These little boxes are showing you the little spots where this little animal is kind of fluffed up. And so a lot of the ideas that are around how integument would evolve have to do with metabolism. The earliest mammals, when they get high metabolism, we think that's when they get fluffy, because that's your insulation. You're keeping your body temperature up high, insulate yourself so you don't spend so much energy that then just gets lost to your habitat. So these little dinosaurs are some of our first fluffed up little dinosaurs. And all the ideas about why that evolved in the first place have to do with metabolism. Yeah.
Do we know whether or not the fluffiness of the dinosaurs is like age related? Is that something we do?
Everybody suspects, but we don't have amazing, like bulletproof evidence that like an animal like Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is tremendously huge in adult size, was like a fluffy baby. And then like an elephant today, most elephants, most rhinos, like big mammals lose their fur because they actually need to lose heat. That's their problem. They're too hot. Elephants have huge ears, not because they hear really well. They're radiating blood through those ears all the time to like let the heat get taken out of them because they're so big. And so big dinosaurs probably like had a heat dumping problem. And so people think T-Rex as an adult probably has a little peach fuzz, but like mostly naked, whereas the babies could have been fluffed out. One of the most interesting feathered dinosaur fossils, I'll show it to you later, is a Tyrannosaur adult, the different species in the T-Rex. It's 25 feet long and head to toe is feathers. And everyone was like, oh, because it's huge. So I don't know. Yeah. Oh, wait. Before you ask that, Cass, I just want to show you. This little animal, by the way, is called Cyuramimus, which means squirrel mimic because of the fluff. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
T-Rex or other big tyrannosaurs that have like things like doolabs where it just gets rid of meat.
Yeah, absolutely. Big time. I don't have time to talk about it. I already showed you long neck dinosaur stuff and then I had to go like this. But like there's some of the long neck dinosaurs. What do you do if your neck is 40 feet long and it's full of air sacs? Are you really not like evolving like big display balloons all along your body or whatever? Never gonna be able to show you the fossils of that, but it certainly happens a lot. People have done despicable paleo art of like dinosaurs doing like a frog thing, but your neck's 40 feet long. Where it's like anyway, so feathers, the earliest kind of feathers are way back here. So you don't get birds until maybe here, and here's the living groups of birds. But the feathered thing, the bipedal thing, the tridactyl foot thing are ancient things that modern birds just inherited. The furcula's back here, but it's not a furcula for flying until somewhere over here. So I just really like this because I like emphasizing to you guys how crazy all these bird features are when you spread them out and understand how they're distributed. Birds just become like their another kind of little dinosaur that just figured out the flight thing. All right, again, so many dinosaurs we don't have time for. I'm going to tell you this story. Some of you might know this story just based on what this is. This is the first dinosaur ever described by Western science. It's called Megalosaurus bucklandi. It's a meat-eating dinosaur, pretty standard, mouthful of teeth. From England, so 1820s is when it gets described. I have to tell it to you because I think it's so funny. This is the first dinosaur that was ever scientifically like figured. This is the end of the femur of Megalosaurus. So this femur was found in the 1600s. So it was like Elizabethan England. And it was etched, this etching is from that time. People knew it was a femur. They thought it was one of like a Roman elephant's femur, like from when the Roman army used to be in the UK. It wasn't the UK, I shouldn't say that. When it was in England, maybe this is an elephant femur and it got published on. But then other people published on it too, because they were finding bones. And this is again 1600s-ish, early 1700s. And they thought some of the bones they were finding were from giants. So they like not dinosaurs, because nobody knew about extinction, nobody knew about fossils. These are from giants. And so this thing got figured again, and the person gave it a name, a genus and species name. Linnaeus hadn't lived and published like binomial nomenclature yet, but it gave it a genus and species name, italicized, and called this bone scrotum humanum, because they thought it was a giant, like from a giant. And so what's really great is there was a moment in the 1990s when absolute like nerd people were like, well, you know, technically scrotum precedes Megalosaurus. And so the first dinosaur technically should be called like scrotum S. humanum in the literature. And the ICZN, the International Commission on Zoological Nomenclature, had to issue a decree to be like, no, we are dismissing forever calling the first dinosaur genus scrotum. But up here you have to see that because that's great science. And that's how dumb humans can be sometimes. This is what Megalosaurus was reconstructed as in Victorian England. So after it first got described, this is what they thought it looked like, because people don't know what dinosaurs are at that time. It's like Jane Austen times. And then they start going around, and this is from a park in the 1850s outside of London, where they planted some ferns from New Zealand, one of their colonies, to like make it look like dinosaur time and be like, here's what Megalosaurus looks like. This is spectacular. People didn't know about these animals. And so you have to give them all this credit for like making an effort. This is of course what it looks like for real. But it's really cool, right? It's really fantastic. Also in this part of the tree are some of the other greatest dinosaurs of all time, like OGs. This one gets way too much press. I'm not particularly impressed with it, but it's a big crocodile monster that's like almost quadrupedal because it's so big, called Spinosaurus. It's definitely a fish eater. Some people think it fully swims. I don't think it fully swims. But here it is dragging a humongous lungfish out of the water. This ecosystem that it lives in is full of crocodiles and full of lungfishes that are like 20 feet long, which is really fun to imagine. So anyway, there's that. Again, some of the biggest meat eaters of all time are in this part of the tree. They're not particularly close to birds, but they have those things that we've already talked about. That's a skeleton on display in Atlanta. That's how big these things can get. It's a real nightmare. These are the ones that are bigger than T-Rex. They are technically like a little bit longer, a little bit taller. They're not as like ripped, but they are a little bit longer. Allosaurus is a very famous dinosaur. You maybe heard Allosaurus. It goes in this part of the tree. All right, skipping ahead. I just told you about those. Now we're getting into the ones that are getting like truly birdy and weird. Once we get to this clade here, this is where all of the really amazing fossils from like the 1990s, the 2000s up until today have like been like, oh wow, there's feathers all over dinosaurs. And not just like maybe a little bit of fluff, but like real true like display feathers, long, complicated feathers. So here's like a bunch of different animals that like paleo art and fossils of them. This is the first one that was ever described. This is the one that was in 1995, like blew everybody's minds. It's called Sinosauropteryx. It's a little tiny dinosaur. I hope you can see its fluff. One thing that's really cool in this fossil is we've been able to like see the pigment cell shapes in the feathers, like under electron microscopes, and get an idea of what color it actually was. There's only a handful of dinosaurs that's true for. And Sauromymus is like a rusty orange, and then its tail has rings of white and rusty orange like a lemur. Got like a lemur tail, which is really fun, right? So you can imagine feathers evolving as like a sort of metabolic insulation. And then of course, like you're covered with stuff. Well, let's make it pretty because it's all about display and behavior and mating and all that. So here's what Sinosauropteryx might have looked like walking around in the forest in China, which is super cool. T-Rex is one of the animals that has feathers, probably, almost certainly. This is that Tyrannosaur I told you about that's 25 feet long that has feathers all along its body, also from China. Some of these ostrich dinosaurs don't really seem to have too much feather on their body, but they have huge feathers on their arms. Nobody's flying with that. They're like 10 feet tall, but big display feathers, very ostrich-y. Lots of cool stuff. This animal, we have great skeletons of, big feathers on its tail, big fans on its arms, but it's basically a little chicken animal. Really cool. Doesn't have teeth, totally not related to birds in that sense, did it on its own. All these weirdos are living ecologies over tens of millions of years with these feathers as part of their biology. It's so amazing to think about their lives. Here's those arms I told you about. So this is one of the ladies that found those arms back in like a Polish, this is really cool. It's like a Soviet, Polish, Mongolian expedition, like post-World War II Soviet stuff. They went to Mongolia and found these. So these are the arms that everybody knew about and was like, that's a real nightmare to imagine who that is. I know that T-Rex is so scary, and those arms are like this. So what's this animal gonna look like? And so like I told you guys, it wasn't until like the early 2010s, I wanna say 11, 12, 13, that this animal actually got full skeletons. And so that's what it actually looks like, which is super fantastic. So there's two of the skeletons, one that has a skull, and then we can get an idea of the whole animal's anatomy with this hump. And so the hump is probably holding ligaments to like hold the neck up. It's not like it's a hump full of fat or something, which is what bison do. This big hump, these big, like the spine goes like this, but the neural spine at the top of it go up really high. Really fun, really cool to imagine. Some of my favorite dinosaurs of all time are in this area of the tree too. So these are animals called therizinosaurs. They're also called like potbelly Freddy Krueger monsters because they have claws that are like 1.5 feet long each on their gigantic hands, definitely covered in feathers. We got a couple fossils of them with their feathers. Some of them are really, really huge. Here's their hand claws. So that's like humongous. a foot, just the claw, and you can imagine the keratin on there. Other groups of animals in this clade are things like these oviraptors, losing almost all their teeth, being covered in all kinds of feathers. These dinosaurs get extremely birdy. They have nothing to do with birds. They do it on their own. So this like kind of this generalized body plan starts to be something that's more common. These animals are associated with nests and eggs sometimes. They might neg people, I don't know. But they're associated with eggs and nests, which is really cool. We know a whole lot about their reproductive biology. I won't say too much about this, but if you guys are still Bengals in the fall, we're opening at the museum Idaho's dinosaurs, and Idaho has this kind of an animal. You're like this tall. And we're gonna have a skeleton of this thing at the museum on campus in October, so come check it out. I want to make the point that everything you've been seeing on this meat-eating dinosaur side of the tree is a meat-eating dinosaur, except for some of these ones. This is how big they all are. If you put them next to each other, the Freddy Krueger one, the giant bird monster one, and then the one with the big arms. What's interesting about them is we see repeated convergent evolutions, we think, of herbivory, or at least a lot of omnivory in some of these things. So imagine the middle of this phylogenetic tree. Here's your Spinosaurus, here's your T-Rex, here's like Velociraptor, but in the middle, there's all these clades that like independently evolve gigantic body size and herbivory. And they're all doing like sloth stuff. Big arms, eating plants, long tongues. That's cool, right? That's really fun to know that in the middle of all the meat eaters, this stuff is happening. Those ones that are found on nests, totally super feathery. Some of them even have pygostyles, so fused caudal vertebrae that make a tail fan. And then there's small individuals that have fossils where we actually have the tail fan preserved. So these are animals that are like brooding their nest. This is a female oviraptor. We think it's a female, actually, we don't know. This is an oviraptor skeleton brooding eggs. The eggs are like this. This is one fossil from Mongolia. There's the feet, there's the arms. And so we know they have feathers. So this sandstorm came in, and whether this is the father or the mother, they went like this on the eggs and they just got buried. Hello, though, they're using their feathers, they're using their anatomy, they're covering up their eggs. This is as birdy as you can get. Plus this pygostyle thing. So these animals are getting to be like, I don't know, giant, I call them giant bird monsters because like a lot of the snapemorphies you guys associate with birds are present in these animals, but they are absolutely not themselves birds at all. Next up on this tree are things like raptors. So there's Chris Pratt, here's like Jurassic Park kind of stuff, the killer, you know, slashy kind of dinosaurs from the movies. We know they're feathered. There's tons of fossils of them with feathers. And what's really cool is this is an eagle ulna, and this is an eagle ulna right here. Birds of prey, like vultures and eagles, have like actual little nubbins on the bone where like the big feathers attach on their gigantic wings. And that is a velociraptor bone from Mongolia, and it has the same like little oops down its ulna. So we know it has like a certain kind of feather. A lot of the small raptor dinosaurs, I'm talking like this tall, like could land on your arm like a cool falcon, are totally like head to toe feathers, and they've got leg and arm airfoils. So when they jump out of the tree, they got 4 wings and a big tail, which is really cool. This is a really excellent piece of paleo art because this tree, this true bird, and this dinosaur are all found from the same place. There's fossils of this dinosaur with the leg of this bird in its stomach. And we know from those same pigment studies that this little raptor is black from head to toe. So this is like a super accurate artistic reconstruction of this animal eating that animal in that tree. Yeah.
Do we think those guys had like the 4 airfoils that they were like actually flying and were like fighting?
Great question. So this is what's cool. Now we're getting into the part of the dinosaur family tree where people actually start to argue with each other about what makes a bird. We're starting to lose the like resolution. But if you think about it, that's exactly what we should expect. If we end up with a fossil record that's 100% complete, there shouldn't be one obvious time when there's a big change. It should be gradual. And so here's a phylogenetic tree. These are all, this is a raptor thing, this is a raptor thing, this is that thing that we call the first bird, fossil bird, pigeon. And so look at this. These blue and green structures are the things that those animals, all feather-based, might have been using as airfoils on their arms, legs, and tail. Do me a quick favor, talk to your neighbors. What are some observations between the living bird and all these other things that all have airfoils too.
A lot of students there.
I'm really sure that. And no.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna observations or questions people have about this stuff. I like to think about this as these animals are all found in forest habitats. You have all seen in our locomotion lectures how gliding evolves all the time. There's a bunch of frogs, and a bunch of lizards, and a couple snakes, and a bunch of marsupials, and a bunch of placentals. Gliding little vertebrates is not hard. And so here's some just like little forest dwelling, tree dwelling dinosaurs. I absolutely think a lot of them are just gliders in the forest. And so what are some differences or what are some observations you guys have for these different kind of comparative anatomies?
Yeah, like somehow most of these have airfoils on their legs as well.
Yeah, birds usually no airfoil on the legs, right? What else is different about the birds here?
Much shorter back.
Much shorter back. We haven't talked about it yet, but these are all birds in the sense of like Archaeopteryx is the definition that humans have picked for like this common ancestor and on is birds. None of these animals have like that keeled sternum. Only the pigeon does. So a lot of the like specific anatomy for like powered flight in today's birds isn't here. Bipedal, tridactyl foot, airfoils, feathers, pneumatized bone, absolutely. But this thing, Archaeopteryx, doesn't have a keeled sternum and it's still got a lot of teeth. So like thinking about these things, right? The order of the evolution of these features is really, really pretty great. And so wings, I'm gonna say wings with an asterisk, because some of these raptors are absolutely little gliders, but wings where we think they could flap them and fly. Archaeopteryx is sort of one of those ones that's like, we think yes. Wings kind of go here, meaning powered flight. But there's no keeled sternum, it's not some crazy amount of flying. There's no migrating Archaeopteryx flocks. They just maybe could go like this and get higher up into the tree if they want to. This area is obviously a ridiculously contentious and highly studied area of like vertebrate biology, vertebrate anatomy. Bird origins right there is super zoomed in. It's fairly intense. I really like this. Here's Archaeopteryx, a better picture for you guys of the first bird, for whatever reason. This is the animal we've chosen as our linchpin for bird evolution. Still has a mouthful of teeth, still has a long bony tail, but you can see the feathers on the tail, you can see the feathers on the arms, you can see that the wing anatomy is very birdy, but it still has claws at the end of the fingers. So it's not quite a bird in a lot of ways you guys might think, but this is what science has chosen to be the first thing that defines everything after it as a bird. Here's its skeleton though, put back together again with the feathers taken off. It's just a little raptor, look at its foot. It's just a little tiny rat, that's 10 centimeters. So like, actually, wait a minute. Oh, so close. Almost this is to scale, it's not, it's small. It's like this big. That is really fun. The first bird is really just a little raptor. Here's a whole bunch of fossil birds from the Cretaceous period. So there's T-Rex, there's Triceratops, there's duckbills, there's armored dinosaurs, there's pterodactyls everywhere. Some of them are huge and incredible, whatever. In the forests and in the plains and in the wetlands, there's birds. Little flying dinosaurs that absolutely can fly. These are all real fossils next to the reconstructions of the birds. Go ahead and talk to each other, make some observations about these Cretaceous birds. All right, what kind of observations do we have? Little finger claws, there's claws there. I really like this one. This one's called Confuciusornis from China. The birds are found with their feathers. Only half of them have really, really, really long tails. And so probably boys. And so this art of like this ancient ginkgo tree, she's checking him out. He's being like singing his little song, showing off his tail feathers. This is great, right? This is familiar stuff. There's little teeth in that mouth though. So there's display features. This one has a crest. We don't know it's blue. I just really hope it is because I love how that looks. The point I'm trying to make is there's tons of birds that have nothing to do with today's birds. None of these are related to today's birds in any special way. They're all equally related to today's birds, but there's still a lot of different kinds of birds. Here's some more extreme versions of Cretaceous birds. You met this one yesterday, the one that has almost no arms and swims with its feet. It's lost the ability to fly. It almost has lost the ability to walk. It's a marine dinosaur. Insane. We talked about it yesterday. But one of the other really well-known birds from like those Kansas oceans is this one, which is called Ichthyornis, the fish bird. It's basically a seagull, big old keeled sternum, excellent powered flight. This is when the keeled sternum shows up, mouth full of teeth. So all these things you guys talked about, losing those teeth is like the last one. Flying, feathers, keeled sternum, tridactyl foot, bipedal, there's still teeth in the mouth. So fantastic. So that keeled sternum shows up there, and that is homologous with the keeled sternum of all of today's birds. And so I just wanted you guys to see these features now that we've learned, but like spread across dinosaur evolution in the context for where they show up. That tooth loss, though, still hasn't quite happened yet. What time is it? We can do it? 2 minutes. Oh boy. Here's something I'll show you. Just we can end with this. There's a time calibrated phylogeny. There's today. Here's going back in time. Here's an ostrich. There's a pretty songbird. Every single one of the 11,000 species of bird today is in this phylogeny. You can see their common ancestry goes back. So like here, the asteroid impact that kills T-Rex, that's people taking DNA from living birds and making molecular estimates of their divergences. I then, paleontologists then, can go look for fossils. We found fossils of those birds with teeth, and then they stop. So this asteroid impact kills T-Rex and Triceratops, kills most birds. A couple of birds survive and are the ancestors for every kind of bird you guys know. Hummingbirds and penguins and ostriches and chickens are all part of this gigantic radiation that's only from the last 66 million years. It's very, very bananas. I want to show you the last thing today is that the bird that survived, we actually know quite a lot about. The common ancestor of all of today's birds is going to be something like a ground-dwelling, seed-eating bird, which is really amazing. It's one of many thousands of ecologies that birds had back then, but then an asteroid hit and all the forests got knocked down and everything got set on fire and all the plants are dead. So living on the ground and eating seeds just might have been an incredibly lucky thing to be doing, because you get to survive through this terrible couple years, and then there's no more birds anywhere, and you evolve into this, which is completely cool. Okay, last thing that happens, they lose their teeth. All right, thank you. I'll see you guys on Thursday.